Cameron, I'm so glad that you came over on your day off.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're doing counseling work on your day off, but I love that. And I respect you so much as a therapist and as a friend. And so I'm excited to share the Townsend model
I'm
with
excited
you
to hear it. I'm
today.
going to take notes.
Okay, that is great. And I will leave room at the end for questions if anything is confusing.
Cool.
I feel like a pretty simple model, but there's also so much to it that there's like a lot of information.
Okay.
So if I don't explain anything well, just feel free to ask.
Okay.
And so, but I have loved this program, and honestly, something that I really love about the Townsend model, and I feel like Dr. Townsend has like kind of put this into our minds from the very first time we were on campus, but this is like a personal growth thing for me as well. And so this, as I've learned about the model, it's not just something that I think is going to be so helpful with clients, but like I myself have learned about myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been really cool. And so every semester we have to like check our character capacity, which we'll talk about that, and talk about how we've grown and how we've been challenged. And so I think it's also just like really easy to apply personally for our growth. So I will jump in. So the Townsend model defines character as the set of capacities that are required to meet the demands of our reality. So every one of us has this internal structure that is just moving with us through life, and it's what's allowing us to handle the stuff that's thrown at us. And as life gets more challenging and difficult with grief and loss and stress and relational stuff, the strength of our character on the inside that was formed from when we were little is what comes through. And so, and as we talk about how this looks in the counseling room, you know, that's really what's going to present from our clients. Like they're going to come in because of something that is going, quote, wrong. You know, nobody comes to us because everything's going right. And so when they come to us, it's because something in life has pressed, and they're experiencing symptoms that they don't like because of what's happening on the outside. But where that's coming from is that internal capacity on the inside. Like there's a hindrance or a breakdown somewhere there. So when we talk about that character capacities, there's 4 parts, 4 elements that we each have. And this is not just some people, this is all of us. So it's attachment, separation, integration, and adulthood. And these are formed from our very earliest moments. So, I mean, even research has shown that like a baby and a mother in the womb are connecting, you know, so even before birth, but especially as soon as you're born, attachment is that very first capacity that is starting to form. And when we have a consistent, loving caregiver that's giving us what we need, that's meeting our needs, it's allowing us to have needs and crying and then responding to us, that's helping us to establish what it feels like to be attached to someone. That's helping us in the future establish emotional regulation. On the flip side, if you have an inconsistent or a neglectful caregiver, you're not going to be able to establish the ability to connect with someone, and you don't know what it feels like to emotionally regulate because they didn't give you the opportunity. And so that starts at birth, and then it continues on, but around 6 to 9 months, the second character capacity begins to develop, and that's separation. So this is where, you know, if you picture like a little baby that you know in your life, like they start to express their own opinions, whether it's like food that they don't like, or they want to crawl somewhere that you told them not to crawl. And so they're starting to understand, like, I'm different from my mom. I'm a separate being. And that, of course, the big counseling word is the ability to differentiate. So they have this ability to have their own little life, and that starts really young. But on the flip side, if you have a caregiver who's like overbearing, overprotective, makes all your decisions for you, you don't establish that ability inside of your own structure to be your own person. And so of course that shows itself through all kinds of stuff when you're older. You know, you want to be like everybody else, you can't differentiate, you don't know what you like. If you're wanting to date someone, you don't know what you like, and you try to be who they want you to be, and you don't have good boundaries. But all of that is like starting when we're babies, which is pretty crazy. And then the last one of the 4 that is really formed in infanthood or little years up to like 36 months is that integration piece. And so these are all affecting us throughout our life, but they're really like formed in by the age like 3 or 4. So integration is simply the ability to hold the good and the bad, to know that life is going to have some hard and it's going to have some good, and they can both coexist. And the way that that forms in us as a baby is really with that first caregiver. So what that looks like is a baby having to come to terms with the fact that this mom who smiles at me and holds me and picks me up when I'm sad, she also looks mad sometimes, and she puts me in timeout, and she walks out of the room when I'm crying and I'm going down from my nap. And is she good? Is she bad? Am I good? Am I bad? And you can all, if it's healthy and this is forming well, then you realize, oh, it's both. Like, she's good and bad. She loves me and I'm in trouble, right? And so when that is formed in us when we're little, of course, that carries into later stages of life in huge ways to be able to hold the good and the bad. And then that last one, which is adulthood, this one is actually more influenced. It starts with our young years, but it's more influenced throughout childhood and adolescence, because this really connects back to how we interacted with our authority figures. So did we have an overbearing authority figure who never let us have a voice? Did we have a super permissive authority figure who let us run the house? What was that climate like? And probably even as a therapist, you're hearing some like object relation stuff in here, like the ways that we interacted with those people in our house, like that forms how we're going to interact with our authority here on out. And so that's going to be with our bosses, with our spouse someday, with a leader in our church. And there's a couple of different stances we can take if it's unhealthy. We can take the child to adult stance. So we're always a child. I'm always in trouble. My voice doesn't matter. And if we had a father figure or a mother figure who made us feel less than, or made us didn't let us have a voice, we're going to carry that with us until that's healed. If we had, maybe there's like an insecurity and it's the one up, the people who always have to be right, always have to have the last word. And so they're trying to relate to everyone around them, is like, I want to make sure I'm the adult in this room, right? Mm-hmm. The healthy way though is like adult to adult. Like, even if I have a boss who's over me, I'm able to walk in with confidence and grace and have a conversation and know that you're my boss, but we're also both adults. And I don't have to cower to you and be nervous, and I don't have to prove myself to you. Like, we can just both be adults. So that is like the overview of the character structure. And as you can see, even as I'm talking, I'm sure you're like, therapy light bulbs are going off, like what this could look like in people as they're not developed. The cool thing is that we believe that change is possible, and I know you do too because you're a therapist. So we believe that problems develop when there isn't that consistent loving caregiver, and there's gaps in some of those developmental capacities inside of us. And so then things that are going to present later in life are going to be like emotional dysregulation, anxiety, defense mechanisms, because we don't want to feel the feelings, and so we put up these defenses, relational issues. And the Townsend model, it is kind of based off of a tree, or not kind of, it's based off of a tree diagram. And so if you think of a tree, the fruit is what you can see, right? You can't really see, you can see the trunk, but you don't know what's going on inside of it, and you for sure can't see the roots. So when we're looking at our clients, the fruit is the thing that they're probably coming in about, right? They're going to come in and say, I have this anxiety and I don't know what to do with it. Yeah. So from a Townsend model, like, that's the problem that they've presented. We're going to look backwards and we're going to say, okay, the trunk is what supports you though. And so which of those character capacities is hindered? Which one is lacking? Is it attachment, separation, integration, or adulthood? And we're going to, that's how we know we have a hint or a hypothesis of where we're going to kind of dial in. And what's under the roots or under the ground is the root system. And according to the Townsend model, we believe that the most important nutrients we can give our client is grace, truth, and time. So we're going to provide them that opportunity that they maybe didn't have with their early caregiver. Like, if they felt anxious, if they felt insecure, if they felt unheard, unloved, we're going to actually provide like a mismatching experience to that. So we're going to give you grace. We're going to give you unconditional respect. We're going to give you a space where you can share and you're not going to be judged. And through that therapeutic relationship, we believe that that's where change happens, because they can suddenly begin to relate in healthy ways over time. And so we do believe that this all takes time. And with the truth piece, that's going to be our psychoeducation. So that's where our counseling theories and techniques are going to come into play in the room. And, I already mentioned object relations, but the Townsend model leans really heavily on psychodynamic. And so I'm sure you're hearing all of this as I'm explaining it. Like, these are the ways really that, to me, are the biggest ways we align with psychodynamic. It's that emphasis on the person over the symptom, right? So we see the fruit, which is the symptom, but we don't want to just, quote, fix that fruit. We want to look at the whole person and help them walk towards healthiness. And then we look at those early experiences, and we believe that those are foundational. We also believe in the transformative power of the therapeutic relationship, with both transference and countertransference, those mismatching relationships. Like, we are going to provide that steady stable relationship so that they can actually go back in and heal and resume growth in those places that are inside of them that were not properly developed. And so in that, we rely heavily on neurobiology or like the fact that we all have neuroplasticity. Mm-hmm. So like, even though those early experiences lock in some things, and so that's like pathways in our brain are developed and like habits are developed, and so in that way our neurobiology is involved, but we also believe that God made our brains to be able to change and grow, and so we tap into the fact that we all have neuroplasticity. And so our hope is that through this therapeutic relationship they can actually begin to retrain their brain to go in new pathways. And so, you know, when someone is going to tell me you're going to tell me something, you're expecting me to be angry. Well, when I respond with grace, that's just one experience, and they continue to build on one another, and suddenly over time this client's like, oh, I don't have the same reaction that I used to have. And that is how we look at change. Like when we begin to see different fruit in that client, then we know, okay, that internal capacity is getting stronger, right? Like they have received these nutrients that we have given to them. And that's going to play out. And we kind of, it's easy, it's 3 Ps, so it's easy to remember. We look at the fruit in the areas of their person, their people, and their performance. And so like the area of the person, like what is your emotion and your behavioral responses? Like are you responding in more healthy ways? Are you less anxious? Are you less paranoid, less jealous? Or, you know, the eating disorder is like you're not turning to food for comfort, you know, like are you personally responding in different ways? And then in your people, how are your relationships with the people around you? Are they healthier? Are you fighting as much? Is there more peace? Is there less strife? And then in your performance, that would be like in your work or in the things that you do outside of your life, is that healthier? And so that's the fruit that we see, and we use those as clues to help us see the health of our client. Mm-hmm. We also look at what's going right. So we don't want to just talk about these things that are wrong in a client's life. We really want to look at, what are you doing right? What are you doing well? And like, how can we integrate? Like you are this whole person, and you are not just this symptom that you came in to tell us about, and you are doing some things really well. And so let's integrate those things, and let's celebrate those things and help you grow in those ways. And so I'm sure you heard like several different types of, you know, counseling theory and practice in there. We also sometimes in the room might use Gestalt therapy, where we do an empty chair or a role model. We might use CBT, where we're helping a client develop a new skill. And so you can really use the Townsend model like woven in with these other theories that are, you know, research driven, and they have excellent results. And so that's kind of what I love about Dr. Townsend's vision. It was, I want to take like evidence driven, good psychotherapy, but I want to like have this crossing point with Christian theology and Christian like thoughts. And so you've heard the evidence-based part. What I love is that this also like really connects with theology. And so we do believe that God first modeled this example of the power of relationship. You know, like God has always existed in relationship with the Son and the Spirit, God the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And so he, from the very beginning, modeled the power of relationship. And then he sent Jesus to be in relationship with us and have a redemptive relationship that frees us from our sin, that helps us with those things that are holding us back. And so even just in the model of the gospel, you can see this Townsend method like underscored there. And as even if we're not saying this to our client, you may have a client who's not a Christian, but I know that this truth I'm telling you is based on like my relationship with God. And he allows us as counselors this like incredible opportunity to kind of be that like partner with him and be that helper for this client, which through his Spirit, like giving us, you know, love and grace for this client, like he allows us to partner with him. And so I just think that's really cool, the way that that's modeled even through the Father. And then Jesus himself, there's a couple of examples where he talks about trees, and although he wasn't talking about the character model exactly, in Luke 13:6-9, he gives this parable about a barren fig tree, and it was yielding no fruit. And he's talking to the gardener, and he basically, I'll paraphrase, but he's saying, like, give it a year and give it the nutrients that it needs and come back and see what's happening in that tree in a year. And right there is that like example of grace, truth, and time. Like we're gonna pour these nutrients into our client, and we're gonna see if this fruit changes over time. Jesus also says in Matthew 7:16 that by your fruit you're recognized. And so again, this is, our internal structure and our internal health is shown through our person, how we are handling stress, our people, our relationships, and our performance at work and at life in general. And so I do feel like this just really mirrors like Jesus talking about the heart and the strength of our character, and then how that overflow is going to affect our life. So I think that I have covered the Townsend model. I know that was really fast.
That's great.
And I was wondering what questions that you have.
Do I have time for questions?
No, you're good. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're good.
How would you use the model with a couple? So like if you had a couple come in, like how might you walk through the same like structure with grace, truth, and time with them, and like help them turn towards each other to help each other in that?
Yeah, that's a great example or a great question. Dr. Townsend gives this example. I actually was watching a video yesterday, and he was talking about this couple that came in and they were like ready to divorce. They were like, but they were both Christians, so that also is a piece to it. Like it's helpful when they do have a relationship with God. So I'll start with that. But he talked about how they were like, we're done. Like we don't even love each other anymore. And he was like, but do you love God? And this person was like, yes. Do you love God? Yes. And he was like, okay, will you commit to me that you will work on your relationship with God? Like focus on that. Will you commit to me? And they did. And so that was step one, like them growing and like pursuing God. But also when you're talking about the Townsend model, and his end of the story was like over time, they actually, over a lot of time, fell back in love with one another, but but it was through like the Lord changing their hearts. But using the Townsend model, I think the first thing would be to look at each of the couple and dial that back to like which character structure is not developed. And so maybe the wife has an attachment issue, and you're looking at that and you're talking to her about, okay, because that's basically like she's not looking to her husband for a needs-based relationship. Maybe she's just trying to do it all on her own. Maybe she feels like she could be self-sufficient, but she is married, and so that just is not translating well. So you would work specifically with her on how to develop attachment towards her husband and allow him to meet her needs. Maybe his is more integration, and it's like it's either all bad or it's all good. And so if one thing is going wrong in the marriage or one thing is going wrong at work, like everything's bad. So talking to him about, hey, life is full of bad and good, and we're going to hold both of those things, and your marriage is going to have hard moments and good moments, and they don't cancel each other out. They can both exist. And so as you work on the individual people, that's actually going to make them healthier on the inside and strengthen their character structure. And so then they can turn towards one another and meet those needs that are lacking in each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great.
And we do use, I don't know if I mentioned, but pathology. I mean, we do look at like a DSM diagnosis. That would also be one of the clues that we would use. So maybe someone comes in and says, I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety. Okay, we know that this is a cluster of symptoms that follows with anxiety. And so this is going to be like a part of our clue. And then we're also going to listen as they share their story, and we're going to attune to what they're saying. And so we just put all these things together and look for which character capacity is lacking. And so when we see that, then we just hypothesize, this sounds like separation to me, so I'm going to go there. And as you go there, you're going to know, am I on the right track or not? And maybe you go with separation and that's not really tracking. Maybe you realize, oh, it's actually more of an attachment thing. And so you just kind of shift as you're working with that client.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions?
No? It's great.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking time.
Yeah.
I hope it made sense.
Yeah. Thank you for teaching me. I'll use it.
You're welcome. Have a good day.